Part 5. Scythehood. Scythes, Ran and Chomsky have these morbid conversations. They are twisted, and the first to admit it, but I guess that's part of their charm. Today they were talking about the method they might use to self-clean one day. Noam said he would climb to the top of an active volcano and, surrounded by grand ceremony, hurl himself into the lava. Ain said she would scuba dive the Great Barrier Reef until she either ran out of air or got eaten by a great white. They wanted me to join in their game and tell them how I'd want to go. Call me boring, but I didn't want to play. Why talk about self-cleaning when it should be the farthest thing from our minds? It's our job to end other people's lives, not our own, and I intend to be doing it well into my thousands. From the Gleaning Journal of Honorable Scythe Vote. Chapter 37. Shaking the Tree.
A tragedy, a terrible tragedy.
High-Blade Xenocrates sat on a plush sofa in the grandiose mansion that had, until just 2 days ago, been occupied by the late Scythe Goddard. Now he faced the apprentice, who seemed much too calm for a young man who had been through such an ordeal.
Rest assured that the use of fire by any American Scythe will be banned in conclave tomorrow,
he said. That's definitely long overdue, Rowan told him, speaking not like an apprentice, but more like an equal, which irritated the High-Blade. Xenocrates took a good look at Rowan.
You were very lucky to get out of there alive.
Rowan looked him square in the eye. I was stationed by the outer gate, he said. By the time I saw that the fire had gotten out of control, there was nothing I could do. Scythe Goddard and the others were trapped. That place was a maze. They never stood a chance. Then Rowan paused. He seemed to look as deeply into Xenocrates as Xenocrates was looking into him. All the other sides must see me as very bad luck. After all, I've been through 2 sides in 1 year. I suppose then this nullifies my apprenticeship.
Nonsense. You've come this far, Xenocrates told him. Out of respect for Scythe Goddard, you'll take your final test tonight. I can speak for the beguiling committee, but I have no doubt that, taking into consideration what you've been through, they will find in your favor.
And Citra?
If you receive the ring, I trust you'll glean Mr. Ranova, and thus put an end to this unpleasant chapter of our history.
A servant arrived with champagne and finger sandwiches. Xenocrates looked around. The mansion, which had been so full of servants in days past, now seemed to have only this one. The others must have fled the moment they heard that Scythe Goddard and his associates had succumbed to fire. Apparently, Xenocrates wasn't the only one who felt freed by Goddard's untimely end.
Why are you still here when the others have all left?
He asked the servant.
It certainly couldn't be out of loyalty.
It was Rowan who answered him. Actually, this estate belongs to him. Yes, said the man, but I'll be putting it up for sale. My family and I couldn't imagine living here anymore. He put a champagne flute into Xenocrates' hand. But I'm always happy to serve a High-Blade. Apparently, the man had gone from servant to sycophant, not a very far leap. Once he had left the room, Xenocrates got down to the real reason he had come, to shake the tree and see what, if anything, would fall out. He leaned a little closer to Rowan.
There are rumors that a Scythe, or at least someone who looked like a Scythe, came out to address the firefighters.
Rowan didn't even blink. I heard that too. There are even some phone videos that people uploaded, very blurry from all the smoke. Can't see much of anything.
Yes, it is thanks to the general confusion, I suppose.
Will there be much more, Your Excellency? Because I'm pretty exhausted, and if I'm going to face my final test tonight, I'll need to rest up for it.
You do know that not everyone in the Scythe Dome is convinced that it was an accident. We've had to begin an investigation, just to be sure.
Makes sense, said Rowan.
So far, we were able to identify Scythe Volta and Scythe Chomsky by the rings and the gems from the ropes, which were around the remains. Rubies for Chomsky, citrines for Volta. As for Scythe Rand, we're fairly certain she's in the debris beneath the huge tuning fork that had fallen through the chapel roof.
Makes sense, Rowan said again.
But fighting Scythe Goddard has proven to be a challenge. Of course, there were so many Tonys cleaned in the chapel before the fire got out of control. It's quite an ordeal trying to come up with a positive identification. One would assume that, like the others, Scythe Goddard's remains would be surrounded by small diamonds and the larger jewel of his Scythe's ring, even if the setting melted.
Makes sense, Rowan said for the third time.
What doesn't make sense is that the skeleton we think is his doesn't have any of those things, said Xenocrates, and it also has no skull.
That's weird, said Rowan. Well, I'm sure it must be there somewhere.
One would think.
Maybe they need to look a little harder. Just then, Xenocrates noticed the girl standing at the threshold of the room, lingering there, not sure whether to enter or walk away. Xenocrates couldn't be sure how much she had heard, or even if it mattered. Esme, said Rowan. Come in. You remember His Excellency, Highblade Xenocrates, don't you?
Yeah,
She said.
he jumped in the pool. It was funny.
Xenocrates shifted uncomfortably at the mention of the ordeal. It was not something he cared to remember. I've made arrangements for Esme to be returned to her mother, Rowan said. But maybe you'd like to take her there yourself.
Me?
Said Xenocrates, feigning indifference.
Why would I want to?
Because you care about people, Rowan said with a well-timed wink. Some more than others. As the Highblade regarded the daughter that he could never publicly or even privately acknowledge, he melted just the tiniest bit. The boy had planned this, hadn't he? This Rowan Demisk was a sly one, an admirable trait when properly directed. Perhaps Rowan warranted more attention than the Highblade had given him in the past. Esme waited to see what would happen, and Xenocrates finally offered her a warm smile.
It would be my pleasure to take you home, Esme.
With that, Xenocrates rose to leave, but he couldn't go just yet. There was still one more thing he had to do. One more decision that was in his power to make. He turned back to Rowan.
Perhaps I should use my influence to call off the investigation, he said. Out of respect for our fallen comrades, let their memory be untainted by clumsy forensics that might cast aspersions on their legacy.
Let the dead be dead, agreed Rowan. And so, an unspoken agreement was reached. The Highblade would cease taking the tree, and Rowan would keep the Highlade's secret safe.
If you need a place to stay once living here, Rowan, please know that my door is always open for you.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
No, thank you, Rowan.
Then the Highblade took Esme's hand and left to return her home. The power of life and death cannot be handed out blithely, but only with a stoic and weighty reserve. Ascension to Scythehood should by no means be easy. We who have established the Scythedom have faced our own struggles in the process, and we must ensure that all those who join us in our mission face a trial that is not only instructive, but transformative. Scythehood is humanity's highest calling, and to achieve it should cut one's soul to the very core, so that no scythe will ever forget the ghost of the ring they bear. Of course, to those on the outside, our rite of passage might seem unthinkably cruel, which is why it must forever remain a secret sacrament. From the Gleaning Journal of Honorable Scythe Prometheus, the First World Supreme Blade. Chapter 38. The Final Test. On January 2nd, year of the Capybara, the day before Winter Conclave, Scythe Curry took Scythe on the long drive to the Mid-America Capitol building. Your final test will be tonight, but you won't know the results until tomorrow's conclave, she told Scythe. But Scythe already knew that. It's the same test year to year for every apprentice, and each apprentice must take the test alone. That was something Scythe didn't know. It only made sense that the final test would be some sort of standard that all candidates had to pass. But somehow the thought of having to face that test alone, and not in the company of the others, was troubling. Because now it wouldn't be a competition with Rowan and the others. She'd be competing against no one but herself. You should tell me what the test is. I can't, said Scythe Curry. You mean you won't? Scythe Curry thought about that. You're right, I won't. If I may speak frankly, Your Honor, when have you ever not spoken frankly, Scythe? Scythe cleared her throat and tried to be her most persuasive herself. You play too fair, and it puts me at a disadvantage. You wouldn't want me to suffer just because you're too honorable, would you? In our line of work, we must hold on to every feat of honor we have. I'm sure other sides tell their apprentices what the final test is. Perhaps, said Scythe Curry. But then again, perhaps not. There are some traditions not even the unscrupulous among us would dare break. Scythe crossed her arms and said nothing more. She knew she was pudding. She knew it was childish, but she didn't care. You trust Scythe Faraday, do you not? Asked Scythe Curry. I do. Have you come to trust me at least as much? I have. Then trust me now and let the question go. I have faith in your ability to sign in the final test without knowing what the test is. Yes, Your Honor. They arrived at night that evening and were told that, by the lack of the draw, Citra was to be tested last. Rowan and the two other candidates for Scythedom were to go first. She and Scythe Curie were put in a room to wait, and wait, and wait some more. Was that a gunshot? Citra said, perhaps an hour in. Citra didn't know whether or not it had been her imagination. Shh, was Scythe Curie's only response. Finally a guard came to get her. Scythe Curie did not wish her good luck, just gave her a serious nod. I'll be waiting for you when you're done, she said. Citra was brought to a long room that seemed unpleasantly cold. There were 5 Scythes seated in comfortable chairs at one end. She recognized 2 of them, Scythe Mandela and Scythe Moore. The other 3 she did not. The beguiling committee, she realized. Before her was a table covered with a clean white tablecloth, and on that tablecloth, evenly spaced, were weapons, a pistol, a shotgun, a scimitar, a bowie knife, and a vial with a poison pill. What are these for? Scythe asked. Then she realized it was a stupid question. She knew what they were for, so she rephrased it. What is it exactly that you want me to do? Look to the other end of the room, Scythe Mandela told her, pointing. A spotlight came up on another chair at the far end of the long room that had been hidden in shadows, one not as comfortable as theirs. Someone sat in it, hands and legs bound, with a canvas hood covering his or her head. We want to see how you might, Glenn, Scythe Mayor said. For this purpose, we've prepared a unique subject for you to demonstrate. What do you mean, unique? See for yourself, said Scythe Mandela. Scythe approached the figure. She could hear faint snuffling from beneath the hood. She pulled it off. Nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. Now she understood why Scythe Curie did not tell her, because bound to that chair, gagged, terrified, and tearful, was her brother, Ben. He tried to speak, but nothing but muffled grunts came from behind the gag. She backed away, then ran back to the 5 Scythes. No, you can do this. You can make me do it. We can make you do anything, said one of the Scythes. She didn't know. A woman in violet with Venetian leanings. If you do this, you do it by choice. Then the woman stepped forward and held a small box out to Citra. Your weapon will be random. Choose a slip of paper from the box. Citra reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She dared not open it. She turned to look at her brother, sitting so helpless in the chair. How can you do this to people? She screamed. My dear, said Scythe Mayor with practiced patience, it's not a gleaning, because you are not yet a Scythe. You merely have to render him duties. An Ambudron will take him to be revived as soon as you complete the task we've put before you. But he'll remember. Yes, said Scythe Mandela, and so will you. One of the other Scythes, she did not know, crossed his arms and huffed, much the way she had done on the drive here. She's too resistant, he said. Let her go. This night's already gone on too long. Give her time, said Scythe Mandela sternly. The 5th Scythe, a short man with an odd frown about him, stood and read from a sheet of parchment that could have been hundreds of years old. You may not be coerced into doing this. You may take all the time you need. You must use the weapon assigned. When you are done, you will leave the subject and approach the committee to be assessed on your performance. Is all of this clear to you? Citra nodded. A verbal response, please. Yes, it's clear. He sat back down and she unfolded the slip of paper. On it was a single word. Knife. She dropped the paper to the floor. I can't do this, she told herself. I can't. But Scythe Curie's voice came gently to her. Yes, Citra, you can. It was then it occurred to her that every Scythe, since the Scythedom began, had to take this test. Every single one of them was forced to take the life of someone they loved. Yes, that person would be revived, but it didn't change the cold-blooded act. A person's subconscious mind can differentiate between permanent and temporary killings. Even after he is revived, how could she bear to face her brother again? Because if she kills Ben, she will always have killed him. Why? She asked. Why must I do this? The irritable Scythe gestured to the door. There's the exit. If it's too much for you, then leave. I think she means it is a legitimate question, said Scythe Moore. The irritable Scythe scoffed. The short one shrugged. The Venetian one tapped her foot, and Scythe Mandela leaned forward. You must do this so that you can move forward as a Scythe, Scythe Mandela said, knowing in your heart that the most difficult thing you'll ever have to do has already been done. If you can do this, added Scythe Moore, then you have the inner strength needed to be a Scythe. Even though a big part of Citra wanted to bolt through the door and run from this, she squared her shoulders, stood tall, reached down and took the bowie knife, concealing it in her waist. She approached her brother. Only when she was close to him did she pull it out. Don't be afraid, she said. She knelt down and used the knife to cap the bones on his legs, then the ones that held his wrist to the chair. She tried to untie his gag, but couldn't, so she cut that as well.
Can I go home now?
Asked Ben with a helpless voice that was more than enough to break her heart. Not yet, she told him, still kneeling beside him. Soon, though.
Are you going to hurt me, Citra?
Citra couldn't control her tears, and didn't even try. What was the point?
Yes, Ben, I'm sorry. Are you going to glean me?
He could barely get the words out.
No,
she told him.
They'll take you to Revival Center. You'll be good as new. You promise?
I promise. He seemed the tiniest bit relieved. She didn't explain to him why she had to do this, and he didn't ask. He trusted her, trusted that whatever reason she had, it was a good one.
Will it hurt?
He asked. Again, she found she couldn't lie to him about it.
Yes, it will, but not for long.
He took a moment to think about that, process it, accept it. Then he said,
Can I see it?
For a moment, she wasn't sure what he was talking about, until he pointed to the knife. She carefully put it into his hands.
It's heavy,
he said.
Did you know that Texan scythes only glean with bowie knives? Is that where you'll be going when you're a scythe, Texas?
No, Ben, I'll be right here. He turned the knife in his hand, both of them watching as light glinted off the shiny blade. Then he gave it back to her.
I'm so scared, Citra,
he said, his voice barely a whisper.
I know, so I am. Scared is okay. Will I get ice cream?
He asked.
I hear they give you ice cream at revival centers.
Citra nodded and wiped a tear from his cheek.
Close your eyes, Ben. Think of the ice cream you want, then tell me.
Ben did as he was told.
I want a hot food sundae, 3 scoops with chocolate chip.
Before he could finish, she pulled him close and thrust the blade just as she had seen Scythe Curry do it. She wanted to wail in agony, but wouldn't let herself. Ben opened his eyes. He looked at her, and in a second, it was done. Ben was gone. Citra hurled the blade away and cradled her brother, then laid him gently on the floor. From a door behind them, that she hadn't even seen, 2 revival medics hurried in, put her deadest brother on a gurney, and went out the way they came. Lights came up on the sides. They seemed so much farther away than before. It seemed like an impossibly long walk to cross the room to them, and they began the bruising barrage of comments.
Sloppy. Not at all. There's barely any blood.
She put the weapon in his hand. Do you know how risky that was?
And all that unnecessary banter. She was preparing him, making sure he was ready.
Why should that matter?
She showed courage, but more importantly, she was compassionate. Isn't that what we're called upon to be?
We're called upon to be efficient.
Efficiency must be in service to compassion.
That's a matter of opinion.
Then the sides fell silent, apparently agreeing to disagree. She suspected that Scythes, Mandela, and Meir were on her side, and that the irritable one was not, and for the other two, she had no idea where they stood.
Thank you, Mr. Onova, said Scythe Meir. You may go now. The results will be announced at conclave tomorrow.
Scythe Curry was waiting for her in the hall. Citra found herself furious at the woman.
You should have told me. It would only have made it worse, and if they sensed that you knew before you went in the room, you would have been disqualified.
She looked at Citra's hands.
Cam, you need to wash up. There's a bathroom just this way. How did it go with the other candidates? Scythe asked. From what I heard, one young woman flatly refused and left the room. One boy began, but broke down and couldn't complete what he started. What about Rowan? Scythe asked. Scythe Curry wouldn't look at her. He drew the pistol as his weapon, and... Still Scythe Curry hesitated. Tell me! He pulled the trigger even before they finished reading him the instructions. Scythe grimaced at the thought. Scythe Curry was right. He didn't sound like the same Rowan she used to know. What had he been through to turn him so cold? She didn't dare imagine. I am the blade that is swung by your hand, slicing a rainbow shark. I am the clapper, but you are the bell, tolling the gathering dark. If you are the singer, then I am the song, a threnody, requiem dirge. You've made me the answer for all the world's need, humanity's undying urge. Threnody, from the collected works of Honorable Scythe Socrates. Chapter 39. Winter Conclave. At midnight, immunity for Scythe Terranova and Rowan Damask expired. Either one could now be cleaned, and if the edict was followed, and the Scythedom would make certain that it was, one would clean the other. Around the world, Scythes convened to discuss matters of life, but more to the point, matters of death. The first conclave of the year for Mid-America was to be a historic one. Never before had Scythes permanently lost their lives in a gleaning event, and the controversial nature of that event made it even more significant, as well as the controversy surrounding one apprentice's 3 months' absence following a bogus accusation by the Mid-American Highblade. Even the World Scythe Council had their eye on Fulcrum City today, and although the names of apprentices are rarely known beyond the regional Bejubiling Committee, Scythes from every corner of the globe now knew the names of Scythe Terranova and Rowan Damask. Fulcrum City was blistering cold that morning. Ice ledgered the marble steps leading up to the Capitol, making the stairs treacherous. More than one Scythe slipped, spraining an ankle or breaking an arm. Hitting nanites were taxed that morning, to the delight of spectators, who were thrilled by anything that slowed the Scythe's ascent, allowing more photo ops. Rowan arrived alone in a public car, with no sponsor and no one to shepherd him in. He was dressed in the one color that Scythe sent, black. It made his green apprentice armband stand out and gave him a silent air of defiance. At Harvest Conclave, he had been a footnote, if that, but now spectators jockeyed for position to take his picture. He ignored them, looking at no one as he climbed the stairs, making sure to keep his footing firm. One Scythe next to him stumbled on the ice and fell. Scythe Emerson, Rowan thought it was, although they'd never been introduced. Rowan reached out his hand to help the man up, but Emerson just glared at him and refused his help. I want no assistance from you, he told Rowan, the emphasis on the word you, filled with more vitriol than anyone had expressed to Rowan in all his 17 years. But then, when he reached the top of the stairs, a Scythe he didn't even know greeted him, and said in a comforting voice, You've endured more than any apprentice should, Mr. Damask. I do hope you achieve Scythehood, and once you do, I hope we might share a pot of tea. The offer sounded genuine, and not the product of political posturing. There was the way of things as he entered the rotunda. Hard glares from some of uncomforting grins from others. It seemed few were undecided about him. He was either the victim of circumstance, or a criminal the likes of whom had not been seen since the age of mortality. Rowan wished he knew which of the two it was. Scythe had arrived before Rowan. She stood with Scythe Curry in the rotunda, with no appetite to partake on the lavish breakfast spread. The conversation in the rotunda was, of course, all about the Tony's cloister tragedy, and as Scythe listened to various snippets of conversation, she found herself angered that it was all about the 4 dead Scythes. No one lamented that so many Tonists were gleaned. Some, in fact, colloquially joked about it. In the wake of the Tony's tragedy, Conclave takes on a certain resonance, don't you think? She heard someone say. No pun intended, but of course it was. Scythe Curry was even more anxious than she had been at Harvest Conclave. Scythe Mandela told me that you performed well last night, she told Scythe. But even as he said it, he was guarded. What do you think that means? I don't know. All I know is that if you lose today, Scythe, I will never forgive myself.
It was absurd to think that the great Scythe Marie Curie, Grand Dame of Death, would care so much for her, and would even think there could be any failure on her own part. I've had the benefit of being trained by the two greatest Scythes who ever lived, you and Scythe Faraday. If that hasn't prepared me for today, nothing could have. Scythe Curie beamed with bittersweet pride. When this is over and you are ordained, I hope you'll do me the esteemed honor of staying on with me as a junior Scythe. Others will make advances, perhaps even from distant regions. They'll try to tell you there are things you can learn from them that you couldn't learn from me. Perhaps that's true, but I do hope you'll choose to remain anyway. Her eyes were on the brink of tears. If she blinked, they would fall. But Scythe Curie kept them pulled on her lower lashes, too proud to be seen weeping in conclave. Scythe smiled. I would have it no other way, Marie. It was the first time Scythe had ever called her by her first name. She was surprised at how natural it felt. As they waited for conclave to convene, other Scythes came up to greet them. None spoke of Scythe's detainment or her escape to the chill Argentine region, but some did joke with Marie about that embarrassing journal entry. In the age of mortality, love and murder often went hand in hand, quipped Scythe Twain. Perhaps our dear Scythe Faraday might have picked you perfectly. Oh, go and clean yourself, Curie said, only partially suppressing her grin. Only if I can attend my own funeral, my dear. Then he wished Scythe good luck and sauntered off. That's when Scythe saw Rowan enter the rotunda. It wasn't exactly as if silence fell all over the room, but the volume did dip significantly, and then rose again. There was a presence about him now, not like that of a Scythe, but something else. A pariah, perhaps. But never had a pariah had such a chilling effect on bringers of death. There were those who were saying that Rowan had killed those Scythes in cold blood and set the fire to hide the evidence. Others said he was lucky to have survived and bore no guilt. Scythe suspected that whatever the truth was, it was much more complicated than either of those things. Don't talk to him, Scythe Curie said, when she saw her glancing in his direction. Don't even let him see you looking his way. It will just make things more difficult for both of you. I know, Scythe admitted, although she secretly hoped he would be brash enough to push through the crowd and come to her, and maybe say something, anything, that would prove to her he wasn't the unthinkable criminal people were saying he was. If she was chosen today, Scythe would not defy the edict to claim Rowan, but she did have a plan that might save both of them. It was far from foolproof, and to be brutally honest with herself, it was more like a desperate grasping at straws than a plan. But even the faintest glimmer of hope was better than no hope at all. If she was deluding herself, at least it would allow her to get through this awful day. Rowan had played this day over in his mind many times from beginning to end. He had decided that he would not go up to Scythe when he saw her. He did not need an advisor to tell him it was better this way. Let them stay separate and apart until that miserable moment of truth that would keep them apart forever. If she won, Rowan was certain she would claim him. She was duty-bound to do it. It would tear her apart, but in the end, she would do what had to be done. He wondered how she might go about it. Perhaps she would break his neck, bringing everything full circle and wrapping up the doomed twin apprenticeship with a nice red bow. Admittedly, Rowan was afraid to die, but what he feared more than death were the depths that he now knew he was capable of reaching. The ease with which he had rendered his mother deadlies during his test the night before spoke volumes about the person he had become. He'd rather be clean than be that person. Of course, it was possible he'd be chosen instead of Scythe. Then things would get interesting. He decided he wouldn't link himself. That would be too pointless and pathetic a gesture. If he was ordained, he would defy the edict, invoking the 10th commandment, which clearly said he was beholden to no laws beyond the 10, including any edicts levied by the Scythe. He would refuse to cleanse Scythe and defend her life by taking out any Scythes who tried to do it for him, with bullet, blade, and his own bare hands. He would turn Conclave into a brutal and bloody battleground until they took him down, which wouldn't be easy, considering how skilled he'd become at killcraft and how motivated he was to wreak as much havoc as possible.
And the irony of it was that they couldn't even glean him for it. Once he was ordained, their hands were tied by the seventh commandment. They could punish him, though. They could make him die 1,000 deaths and then lock him away for eternity. And it would truly be eternity, because he would never give them the satisfaction of gleaning himself. Another reason why he would rather be gleaned by Scythe. A single death at her capable hand sounded awfully good when compared with the alternative. The breakfast spread in the rotunda was an elaborate one. Slabs of real smoked salmon, hard-crusted artisan breads, and a waffle station with every conceivable topping. Only the best for the mid-American sides. Rowan ate with rare gluttony that morning, for once allowing himself to fully sate his appetite, and as he ate, he stole a few glances at Scythe. Even now, she looked radiant to him. How ridiculous that he'd still be romanticizing her in these final hours. What could have once been love was now the resignation of a heart long broken. Luckily for Rowan, his heart had grown so cold, its fracturing could not hurt him anymore. Once conclave convened, Scythe found herself tuning out most of the morning's ritual, choosing to fill her mind with memories of the life she was about to live, because in one way or another she would be living it. She focused on thoughts of her parents and her brother, who was still in a revival center. If she was ordained today, the home where she grew up would never be home again. Her biggest consolation would be that Ben and her parents would have immunity from gleaning for as long as Scythe lived. After the tolling of the names and the ritual washing, the entire morning was dedicated to a heated debate about whether or not fire should be banned as a method of gleaning. Usually, hybrid Xenocrates did nothing but mediate and postpone discussions for a later date. The fact that he was advocating for the ban was something everyone in attendance took seriously. Even so, there were strong voices against it.
"I will not have my rights to bear arms trampled upon," read one disgruntled Scythe. "Every one of us should have the freedom to use flamethrowers, explosives, and any other incendiary device."
It was met with both boos and applause.
"We need this man to protect us from tragic accidents in the future,"
insisted Xenocrates. "It was no accident," someone shouted, and almost half the room voiced their bitter agreement. Scythe looked to Rowan, who sat with 2 empty seats on either side of him, for they were still earmarked for the dead. He made no move to defend himself or to deny the claim. Scythe Curie leaned closer to Scythe. "As terrible as that fire was, there are plenty of Scythes happy to see Goddard and his disciples permanently removed from duty. Although they'd never admit it, they're glad the fire happened, whether it was an accident or not. And there are a lot of others who admired Goddard," Scythe pointed out. "Indeed, the Scythedom seems evenly split on that matter." Regardless, common sense finally prevailed, and fire was banned in Mid-America as a method of gleaning. At lunch, Scythe, who still found she couldn't eat, watched from a distance as Rowan stuffed himself just as he had at breakfast, as if he had no care in the world.
"He knows it's his last meal,"
a Scythe she didn't know suggested. Although the woman was clearly showing her support for Scythe, Scythe found herself annoyed. "I can't see how it's any of your business." The Scythe walked away, confused by Scythe's hostility. At 6 that evening, all other conclave business ceased and the day revolved into its final stage. "Candidates for Scythehood, please rise," commanded the conclave clerk. Scythe and Rowan rose to a rumble of whispers in the assembly.
"I thought there were 4.
said the hybrid.
"There were, Your Excellency," said the clerk, "but the other 2 failed their final test and were dismissed." "Very well, then," said Xenocrates. "Let's go on with it."
The clerk stood up, formally announcing them. "The Mid-American Scythedom calls Rowan Daniel Dasmisk and Scythe Querida Terranova. Please come forward." Then, keeping their eyes fixed on Scythe Mandela, who waited for them before the rostrum with a single ring, Scythe and Rowan strode to the front of the assembly hall to meet their destiny, one way or another. "It is with bittersweet joy that I watch the bejeweling of new junior Scythes at the end of each conclave. Joy because they are our hope, and still kindle the idealism of the first Scythes in their hearts. But bittersweet because I know that someday they will become so tired and jaded they will take their own lives, as all those first Scythes eventually did. Yet, each time the new Scythes are bejeweled, I still rejoice, because it allows me, if only for a few glorious moments, to believe that we will all choose to live forever. From the Gleaning Journal of Honorable Scythe.